Hello and welcome to the Give Me the Remote podcast. This is episode 34. We are recording on the 6th of March 2019. We're living in the future now. My name is John and I am joined in the pod, as is our usual way, by Sheridan.
Hi, folks.
Look, we apologise for a change in schedule and a delay in service, but we are back in your ears after attending to some social obligations.
I actually also blame Married at First Sight.
Yeah, look, Married at First Sight absorbs an enormous number of hours of viewing that could be put to things we can actually talk about because it isn't over yet, and whether it'll be worth talking about at the end is anyone's guess, but
Probably itself could be condensed down to, for every 3 hours you watch, you probably really only get an hour of new content.
Oh, funny, yeah, they did just a digest of the new stuff. I reckon that'd rate really well, but then they'd lose the advertisers. Because we're watching ads on TV with that show we would never see otherwise.
Very surreal.
Yeah. Okay, what are we actually going to talk about?
Let's talk about Dirty John.
Your money?
Hey, what's in the safe, kiddo?
Does he tell you where he's going?
No.
Do some snooping.
I hired a private detective.
Threats, harassment, intimidation. Is it possible that's not him?
Oh, man. This was such a weird show.
Well, I had the privilege or benefit of having listened to the podcast.
Which is the 2019 version of I've already read the book.
Pretty much. So, which I didn't know until researching this article, this session, was that it actually did start off as a bunch of, like, a series in the LA Times, and then the journalist that wrote it turned it into a podcast, and now it's been turned into a movie. So it did start out as the written word.
Okay, well, that's good to know. That
we haven't gone totally down the rabbit hole.
The book inspired the podcast as opposed to this podcast, which has no script. So it's Eric Bana, who, as an Australian, we're quite proud of Eric Bana. I think he's one of our better exports.
I just, watching this show and then, like, just looking him up and trying to remember what he'd been in, he's such a versatile actor.
He is, but the production values on this show are not super high. This felt a lot like the Monday afternoon movie matinee.
Well, it was
in
made
a lot
by
of parts.
the Bravo Network, which has a bit of that,
Yeah,
matinee movie.
Yeah,
Real Housewives of Beverly Hills vibe.
Yeah, so the production values are not super, and in parts are downright ordinary. Having said that, there is some very good acting talent in parts in this.
Yeah, Connie Britton's who plays the other main character, is a pretty well-known TV star.
Yeah. And Eric Bana is very good in a very complex role. Although I would say intense nut job is not new territory to Eric.
True. So basically the storyline is that Deborah Newell, she's what, 50s, late 40s maybe, woman, wealthy.
50s, but yeah.
Well, she's older. She's got adult children. She's had a couple of husbands. She's very wealthy.
Yeah.
Runs her own business.
$500,000 in the checking account wealthy.
Yeah.
That's serious walking around money.
Goes internet dating and meets John Meehan, who says he's an anaesthetist.
Not a complete lie either.
No. Anyway, and then it all unravels and he's like a con man, basically.
Yeah. Opioid addicted con man, I think, is worth noting.
Yeah, I don't want to give out too many spoilers.
I'm not going to go further than that, but yeah.
But it's a true story.
Yeah.
But it's a true story that because it is. I mean, I was thinking, is this true crime? Like, what is this? It's
definitely true crime.
Yeah, but it's not in the same mystery sense of the...
We're not left in no doubt as to who did what by the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's, the working through of the layers of his con and the weird layers of his life. I'm not sad that he died because I felt that his death was...
Just totally spoil it there. That's the worst.
Okay, we won't get into how he died.
I guess if you've listened to the podcast, you obviously know. I mean, while you're listening to the podcast, you do kind of assume he's dead because there's no way they could be saying what they're saying.
Yeah.
Because that would be defamation. But I don't know if you get that same sense while you're watching this show.
Yeah. But it's he's such a complex character. I would love to have lived a little longer to at least make an attempt to justify. Except he's such a liar, I guess the justifications wouldn't be that interesting. But what exactly was going through his head? I mean, he was capable of considerable kindness. He was capable of doing good things. He was very desperate and very irrational. And then had a lot of rat cunning and all those things combined into him doing horrible things to lots of people.
Yeah, he does a lot of horrible things.
Yeah.
I actually kind of find the more interesting characters to be the family, especially Deborah, who marries him and just continually like takes his crap or like wants to believe him.
And
but
she goes back to him at a point when I'm sure she would agree today she should have walked away at some of those early break points.
I mean, the odd thing about it is, I mean, it's obviously an abusive relationship because he's lying and stealing from her and all this sort of thing. But it's not an abusive relationship in the same sense of he's not really sort of gaslighting her. Or maybe he is.
He
No,
does.
He probably is, yeah. I'm sort of talking myself into it now. But you just can't believe how she stays with him because she seems to have enough resources and opportunity to leave.
She's unique in women in domestic violence situations.
I feel like I'm victim blaming now, but
in her capacity to leave.
that's what I mean. Like, and she's not entirely stupid. One of the things that doesn't get us, the way they unravel part of the story, which is done quite well in the podcast, is her sister was murdered in a domestic violence relationship. 20 years prior.
It's a very complicated way they touch on it.
Weird way, which I don't think...
The flashbacks are very hard to navigate in this.
Yeah, and it's not entirely sort of... It just is like a weird break in the narrative. I don't think it works very well. But in the podcast, that death and that relationship that her sister was in plays this quite important role in why the family is the way they are and that they're really forgiving and like to think the best of people, which I think is done a little bit more interestingly in the podcast. But
okay.
I mean, one of the things actually about the podcast that's quite astounding, which makes it a great podcast, is they interview her, Deborah, and the daughter.
The eldest daughter.
The eldest daughter. And they're just...
Because the younger daughter... I actually think having watched
actually,
it
I think they do
is the much more interesting character.
They
who
interview
is
the younger daughter.
grossly underdeveloped.
She is. They do interview her in the podcast, I think, from memory, but she's not as significant.
Yeah.
But they're just so upfront and honest about what happened.
Yeah.
Which is what makes it such a
I'm
great...
sure they're still gilding their lilies a bit. I mean, it's just natural.
Yeah, but while you're listening to the podcast, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this woman thought that. Anyway, that's what makes it a good podcast and probably what gave it so much rich material for the show.
Yeah.
I mean, another great thing, finally, a Netflix series, or actually I guess it's a Bravo series, but...
It's on Netflix for us.
It's on Netflix. Yeah. That's only 4 parts.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, it's a 4-part series.
No, it was like 8 episodes.
Oh, it was 8 too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You know what, though? I keep seeing it written as being a 4-part series.
Maybe Bravo showed it as a 4-parter.
As for movie length.
Yeah.
Anyway, we can't explain that. I've not researched it.
It was not overly long, though, and I felt that
It's not overly long.
I would actually say, like, there were characters that I felt needed more development, as opposed to... say a Jessica Jones where everyone's agonisingly flogged out.
Yeah.
So hooray, that's good. The everything's kind of from the female protagonist's POV, so her discoveries about John unravel.
But that's because that's the podcast was, you know.
I get that. It does make it for complicated viewing at times, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, there is, it's like, oh, he's so terrifying. It's like, she had the money. Alone with people, it would be nice if everyone was in this situation. She, A, had the money to rent another place at the drop of a hat. Or
Not just another place, like a
a nice place.
a beachside.
Yeah, but she also had the money to stay in a hotel if she had to. Not everyone can afford to do that. She had numerous family homes. She could have gone stay with her son. Why wasn't he standing up in that
He
situation?
took like 80 grand in cash from her and she didn't even notice.
Yeah, okay. But also, she could afford to hire a security guard 24/7 to keep her safe, which is something that no one else can do in a domestic violence breakup situation. So there are still some unanswered questions for why it was allowed to become quite so horrible.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, why this sister's death in the podcast, it's much better explained. That because what they actually do is they forgive the guy that killed her. And the reason they do that is they just think that people should be given the benefit of the doubt and given chances. And that kind of explains the vibe in the family a little bit better.
I thought the family hated his guts from start to finish, top to toe.
So not that, but the daughters do, but the mother doesn't.
No, yeah, the mother was taken in by it. I mean,
and it explains why Deborah's the way she is. It's
Eric Banner. He's a very charming dude. I mean, I'm not sure if Dirty John was actually as charming as Eric Banner, although he must have been pretty charming because he can turn up in shorts and homeless and convince a very wealthy woman to take him in.
Yes.
So.
Anyway, so it's not to blame the victim, but it's just probably more to be that this is a highly unusual set of circumstances, and that's what makes it interesting.
Okay.
What are you going to give it?
Oh, look, I think 4 stars. I mean, it's got faults, which is why I star off for that, but at the same time, it's enjoyable, it's interesting, there are good performances. I wish the production values had been a little better. But, you know, if there's a good story to be told, I'll watch it even if it's just actors in an empty room. So
they're kind of like that. So, because when you talk about the production values, you're talking about like the fact that the houses, they're all like, it feels like a set that they're on.
I mean, like lighting, colour grading.
Yeah, but you know what I think? Part of that is actually like what they would be like. They're kind of these maybe, glitzy, new money, fake.
It could have been shot better.
Yeah.
By more talented technicians.
I'm not entirely. I agree, but I wonder if some of those choices were actually deliberate.
Well, they might have been deliberate. They were still bad choices.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give it 4 stars as well. I think it's pretty solid. I liked watching it, and I knew the whole story. So
nice one. So what's next?
Period. End of sentence.
Can you explain what is this? Why are you not answering?
Okay. What's this about?
It's about menstruation.
Where?
In India.
Why?
Because it stops girls from going to school.
When?
Now.
Right. Okay. Well, we've covered the basics then.
Do that more often.
I believe this won an Academy Award.
It won Best Oscar for Documentary Short.
Best Oscar, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Is that actually a thing?
It won an Oscar for Best Documentary Short.
Cool. It is certainly a fascinating insight into life in what part of India is it?
I don't know.
I think it's a bit of a failing because India is a very big place and it would be nice to...
It probably did say.
Yeah, but it wasn't abundantly clear.
Yeah.
So, is it rural India?
It was definitely regional. Well, they couldn't get pads. So, I mean, the plot line basically is
so a lack of 7-Elevens is where we're going.
You know, these girls can't go to school because when they menstruate, they don't have anything to soak up their menstrual blood.
Now, it should be noticed that Sheridan is famous in her family for always wanting to talk about periods.
I don't want
even
to...
when no one else wants to talk about periods.
I think it should be discussed more often.
But here you are with your podcast.
So basically, I'm going to talk about menstruation for longer than the length of this documentary, which is 20 minutes probably.
You reckon you can knock in 20 minutes of...
just all about periods.
Okay, and... well, I hope you're still with us at the end of this audience.
So many people click stop.
Look, just so
anyway, back
20 minutes time.
So
just shuffle, fast scrub forward.
So basically, girls can't go to school in rural India because they don't have any pads, and then they have to stop going to school.
And traditionally, they've sort of wadded bits of cloth up.
Yeah, and
That's not
actually
very
put like
reliable.
ash in there and like all sorts of things that not only aren't actually that like that they're not necessarily that secure in that you might not stop your flow. John's cringing. So many other people are cringing. I love it.
No, they all stopped listening. It's nothing but ladies who want to hear you talk about it. Although I imagine
they already know.
They also know about it. So what are we doing here?
But they're quite these other methods can be very unhygienic. So
I mean, ash is very clean, but it does have a lot of harsh chemicals and very abrasive surfaces.
Do you want me to go into graphic detail?
Well, I'm just anyway. I agree that ash is probably not the best solution.
That was even too far for me. So anyway, there's this organisation, I think they come from LA, they're called the PAD Project. I think they were started by some high school students, but anyway, I don't know the full backstory. But they basically
sort of bring a whole industrial tool chain
so they bring these like really kind of rudimentary machines.
They look very complicated to me.
Well, they're hardy. They're hardy machines.
Okay, right.
Like, you know, like there's a crank and bits of metal plates.
It was quite impressive how it turned lots of coloured bits of cloth into white fluff.
Yeah, and then so they make pads basically, and they can make so they're biodegradable pads, and they apparently cost 5 cents each, so that's quite cheap. So anyway, it's about bringing this pad machine to this section of rural India and sort of watching, I guess, probably a bit of community transformation about talking about menstruation a bit more openly, because it is really, really taboo in India or parts of India.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there was a lot of education of how to even use a pad versus just not doing anything for 5 days.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was good, heartwarming, shall we say, to see the lives transformed for the better.
Yes, and I mean, we should be talking about this. This kind of thing is happening all over the world, where women who are doing nothing more than what is biologically they're meant to do.
What's an imperative?
And they're shamed for it, and they're not allowed to talk about it. And I think this was actually quite a nice movie that sort of normalised it.
Yeah, well, 20-minute documentary anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
Film. I don't know. What's wrong with movie?
It's just it's
I guess movie does.
It's a 20-minute documentary. It's not a feature.
Yeah, movie implies 90 minutes. All right.
And I think 20 minutes was long enough. Was there a lot of unresolved things you'd have liked to be added to it?
Well, I'd like to have seen what happened to them if they went to school and then.
Or if the pad machine even didn't just break down and they all went back to.
The pad machine looked very. Like it was robust.
You had faith in the machine.
Yeah. There didn't seem to be a lot of moving parts in there or things that you couldn't buy at a hardware store to fix. It wasn't a computer.
Yeah, I would have been interested in the history of that because I know the Eritrean army in the 1990s got very good at being able to make sanitary pads in the field because they had the only female army in Africa. And it was
that would be a really interesting story.
Yeah, and it wasn't a female army, but they had women integrated into their army, and then that added some interesting and noteworthy logistic quirks to their fighting force. And in fact, the story of Eritrea's wars against Ethiopia is one of sort of tragic heroism in all sorts of ways. But that's not really the subject of this podcast.
I was worried there. It's going to be a new podcast. So how many stars would you give it?
Stars for this? It's on straight up worthiness. It's untouchable.
You were just worried you're going to get in trouble later.
But in terms of entertainment value, particularly...
Is that the job of a documentary?
It still has to engage interest, and you just, as a man, there's a relatability issue that it's like, this is a problem. But can I finish?
God, that is ridiculous.
No, I totally get that it's good that I'm like, I'm being exposed to problems and perspectives that didn't occur to me naturally. I guess that is a very important thing.
To be a white man.
But I am fundamentally a white man, and some of our listeners are white men. And I would say, dudes, just, go with the flow, as it were. Put it on with your lady, or if you with a man friend, then two dudes are never going to choose to sit down and watch this. That's just not going to happen.
What are you rating it?
3.5 stars.
3.5 stars?
Yes.
All right. Well, I'm going to give it 4 stars.
Okay, that's not actually that different. So what are you docking it a star for? Isn't this like the best Oscar winning paragon of cinematic virtue?
I did toss up giving it 5 stars. I was pretty close, to be honest, to giving it 5 stars.
Right, if only you could do half stars. I can do half stars. Sheridan limits herself.
I think there's just a few problems with the pacing.
Aha!
And it was only 20 minutes, but it felt longer than 20 minutes.
Yes.
And I felt maybe
Which was kind of my criticism.
Shut up. I felt maybe that there could have been a little bit more deeper connection with some of the characters or people that featured.
There wasn't a lot of background, but I do wonder how any wealthy audience, I think is a better way to describe it than first world, can relate to rural India. And I think they did quite a good job in getting some sense of relation and shared humanity.
Yeah.
So,
what's next?
Behind the Curve.
Well versed in just about every conspiracy you can think of.
Chemtrails, 9/11.
Did you know they made up dinosaurs?
Tell us more.
So I want to tell a little story now.
Oh.
So in the early 1990s, as a very young, callow Australian, I was in rural Georgia for reasons I won't go into here. And I was introduced to a group and they asked me where I was from with my funny accent. And I said, I'm from Australia. And these people got unbelievably angry. And then, as I recall, called me a liar to my face and stormed off. And it was then explained to me that they were, in fact, firm adherents to the belief in a flat earth, which at the time did not include Australia, and that anyone claiming to be from Australia was sent by the government to try and lie to them as part of the round earth conspiracy.
Well, maybe they didn't think there was Australia because this was before the internet.
Yeah, I think Australians on the internet might have... so this documentary is about modern flat earthers who are considerably evolved and advanced from these horrible people I met.
I reckon there might be some that are still like that.
Well, as they said, there are many camps of flat earthers with many beliefs, but thankfully, for everyone listening to this, Australia is now included in the flat earth view of the world as espoused by, I think they claim to have 70% of the flat earthers on board, which in a way is progress. Slowly, kicking and screaming, they're coming into the modern world.
So yeah, this is a documentary about flat earthers and basically how the internet has re-enlivened flat earthers.
Fringe conspiracy views. They're tied up with anti-vaxxers. I guarantee you 90% of those flat earthers don't believe in vaccination either.
Yeah, look, so they interview they interview 2 people and feature a third person called Matt Powland, who argues he's the father of modern day flat earthers.
Yeah.
And has a pretty...
Powland refuses to be part of the show because they wouldn't sign over editorial control to him.
Yeah, we'll give him any money.
I thought 5,000 was a bit of a lowball figure. I think he didn't realise what he was dealing with here.
Yes.
Anyway.
And then another guy called Mark Sargent,
who's just such a charming average dude.
He's actually pretty alright guy. And then this woman called Patricia Steer, and Patricia and Mark, it's sort of, I guess, a lot of the story
hang on, that's Patrie CIA Steer.
So a lot of the story is about their relationship and how it develops, because they both were doing these YouTube channels and...
Yeah. Now, my personal view is that Sargent and Steer are both too smart, don't actually believe this, but they've spotted there's a niche in the market and these people view a lot of YouTube videos and there is revenue rolling in from that and they're just along for the ride.
Well, I have a bit of a different take because, there's points in the film when both of them, the questions the interviewer asks, they both sort of seem to lock themselves into this corner where they don't have anywhere to go but to accept that what they're saying is rubbish. And you can see them kind of like in their eyes that they know that it's rubbish, but then they just continue along.
I think that's what I was saying.
Yeah, but you were saying that they did it to make money, and I actually think they do it because they found a community that accepts them, and or because they can be leaders within that community.
I think the fact it pays the bills has
and
a lot
fame,
to do with it
I think
as
it's
well.
more about fame though and notoriety, because these people are like oddbods on the rest of society, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying they're bad people. They seem like nice people, but they're really, really odd.
Oh, look, I think in so many ways, this is probably it is the best documentary I have seen since Fog of War.
It's really good.
And Fog of War is an amazing documentary if you haven't seen it and want to know about Robert McNamara and the Vietnam War. And that won an Academy Award as well. But,
I don't think this is going to win an Academy
didn't
Award.
win Best Oscar, mind you.
No Best Oscar for this one. But yeah, like, I think they just like being really good at something. Because they can't be paying that much. Because I looked at Patricia Steer's YouTube channel. It's just 13,000 followers.
Okay, she's not making
not
a lot of money. What about
heaps.
Sargent?
I didn't look him up actually on YouTube. But
Okay.
I think she's the one that has the bigger YouTube channel.
Okay. But the point is they have this following. They're definitely having conferences that they're getting money off the ticket sales. There's a lot of money tied up in the movement now.
Yeah, like, I think there's a little bit of money tied up in it, but like, I think they're doing it for the notoriety. But
they also make clear in this that there's a lot of what people are after is a lot of this anti-science movement comes back to a desire to have biblical literalism, because at least there's just one book you have to read to understand. So Sheridan's wrestling with a cat right now.
It's really quite intense. Okay, he's gone. Look, I agree.
Biblical literalism, they're like, oh yes, we can read the book and it'll tell us what to do and the earth is flat. I don't actually recall ever reading, and I have read the Bible cover to cover, anything actually saying the world is flat in the Bible, but they feel it's implied.
But I think what this documentary does really well though is it makes you understand what this community is like, and it is like what you're saying. It is just about that there's this group of people and they have this really weird idea, and then they get together and no one judges them for it. They can come into this community, they can look whatever they want to look like. They can be like black, they can be white, they can be fat, they can be tall, they can be whatever, and they're all just flat earthers.
Yeah, but this is religion, and their religion is the flat earth.
Yeah.
And then they view anyone who contradicts them as just attacking their faith.
What
is also beautiful in this show is that twice the flat earthers come up with very clever, very well thought out tests to prove that the earth is flat, and then it captures the look on their faces.
I know.
when their very well thought out, very clever test proves again and again that the world is round.
And there's a couple of really funny moments because they interview some like normal scientists just so that you know that the documentary makers don't think that the world's flat. And they're explaining these experiments, and the guy's like, "Oh, that's quite a clever experiment. Oh, they're going to have some problems with that one." And he almost felt sorry for them.
Yeah.
And he was like, at one time, like, felt sort of proud that they could come up with this complicated, scientifically valid experiment, and then at the same time just felt like, I don't know, bad for them. So I guess, like, I think like, it is a really good film because, I mean, they're really good on screen because they're obviously present, YouTube channels and whatever. But
also, this is a 90-minute documentary, which, frankly, please Netflix more of this at this length.
I thought some of the
like
guests...
Murder Mountain, which we haven't actually reviewed, would have been a great 90-minute.
Oh, that's really bad. Some of the guests, though, are a little tiresome. Like, when they interview there's a psychologist. I think he has some good points, and you kind of need them a little... about why someone would be this way.
It helped with
I
the
just feel it was
psychologist.
a little bit bland and not that... I didn't think he was that insightful or in-depth.
And he was very badly dressed.
Yeah.
When the flat earthers are better dressed than you, come on, at least straighten up your tie and put your jacket on properly.
And all of the flat earthers, except for Patricia, seem to be men.
Yeah, she was very much
There was a lot of
she was a honey
dudes.
badger in the MRA scene kind of vibe going on there.
Well, yeah, I don't know if I felt I don't think that's very fair. Well, she's just someone, again, I just think she wants to be accepted.
She is trading off her sexuality in a dude-heavy environment, though.
She's an attractive woman.
Yeah.
And but I don't think that's why she does it. Entirely. She talks about that in the film anyway.
Yes, she does.
Anyway, I thought all of them were presented really sympathetically, and that was one of the nice things about it, is you didn't just feel like... Well, actually, I mean, there's two things. Like, it is really nice that they are given actual, like, humanity. Like, you empathise with them, you find them interesting, you feel sorry for them, you actually kind of feel happy for them at sometimes, because you found what you were looking for. But then at other times, you're just like, oh my God, how can you believe that? It's so dumb.
Oh, yeah, I mean, the genius of this documentary is that it, never lets you think these people are actually right, because that would be a terrible thing for the show to do.
Which is why I think they needed the boring experts that I don't think add very much.
Yeah, but it also does bring out the humanity, and I mean the psychologist, while we might wish he had been better, does play an important role in talking about how these belief systems work and validation, invalidation, and does provide a very important perspective for explaining what on earth is going on. I mean, at least flat earthers, are relatively harmless unless you're me in rural Georgia in the 1990s, in which case I think I was lucky not to get shot. But, whereas anti-vaxxers are actually harmful. But it's still craziness. And also we're just entering an era. I mean, all these people, they're on their microphones and they're doing web videos and podcasts and it's like, this is all technologically based. How can you invalidate some of the most basic science going around?
I know, it's...
and still use all these scientific creations.
Well, those experiments I was talking about with those gyroscopes and those lasers, I did not even understand I sort of understood it, but I'm like, wow, that seems pretty smart to have come up with that.
The math they did on their own.
Yeah, I was like, crazy.
And this is what I loved about it. They predicted the angle of drift on a laser ring gyroscope per hour if the world was round, and then detected exactly that drift. So they've done some very good math to guess what not guess, but to predict how a laser ring gyroscope would behave on a round planet that was orbiting the sun and turning every 24 hours. So bravo for them. But then they just totally swept it under the rug in their own organisation.
It did make me want to go and watch their YouTube videos, though. I haven't, though, which might say something.
I'd stay out of that rabbit hole.
Maybe I'll review that next week.
There's better rabbit holes to go down.
If I'm not here next week.
Yeah.
We all know I've become a flat earther. But will I be a globe or an infinite plane thinker?
They're not infinite planes, they're limited planes.
I thought the infinite plane was...
Remember they got the firmament? So it's like a big...
That's the dome theory.
Yeah, that's the dome theory.
Then you got the infinite plane
So you said
theory.
globe when you meant dome.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, even I was getting confused. Yeah, dome versus infinite planes.
Yeah. Yes.
I think the dome seems better.
It looks prettier.
It's sort of more plausible to me.
So how many stars are you giving this documentary?
I'm going to give it 4 stars just because it was such an interesting topic.
I'm going to give it 4.5. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm giving it 5.
Whoa.
Because as I said, I think this was actually the best documentary in terms of the making of a documentary and the craft of documentary that I've seen since Fog of War. And that was a long time ago. So in terms of the craft, it takes unpalatable people doing an unpalatable thing. It gives them a genuine sense of humanity. It actually listens to them. And
it's not entirely
and lets them say their piece. And just some things that shows them up so beautifully, like when the guy's causing a fight in a Starbucks with a NASA scientist. And then it's just his own video of him saying, I was just asking some questions. And that had his own video before where he was being an absolute dickhead. And also Sergeant's mother, who gets interviewed sitting next to him, is just so priceless. The way she keeps poking holes in the flat earth theory in front of his own mother.
Oh no, it's pretty good.
Yeah, so I think this is the pick of our bunch this week. But actually, it's been a good selection.
It has.
And so we now come to the letters section of the podcast.
Which now apparently is a regular feature.
Yeah. So if you want to get your letter read into the podcast, you need to email it to gmtrpodcast@gmail.com. GMTR for Give Me the Remote, of course. Now, our latest email to gmtrpodcast@gmail.com is from a Mr. Luce Brown. And he has this to say. Dear Sheridan and John, can I congratulate you on your podcast? Why, yes, Luce Brown.
Thank you.
Yes, you may. Specifically, your claim that Marie Kondo is creating untold amounts of misery across our wide brown land. I'd note across the world is, in fact, our claim. Let me tell you of a circumstance that happened in my household very recently. I consider myself a proud house husband, and I was busy sorting the week's washing, folding, putting it into piles, etc. It was when I opened the top drawer belonging to my life partner when the full horror of Marie Kondo was revealed. I had, in the past week, observed my life partner become a Marie Kondo devotee. I was fine with this. I have no superfluous items, so I was immune. My wife had long ago donated, without my knowledge, all my personal items that she innately knew I was better off without. Sadly, even without the barest of necessities, I was affected. My life partner had Marie Kondoed her undies and bras drawer. I checked the next drawer down to find the same thing with t-shirts and shorts. I'm currently refolding all her washing in the style I've observed. I refuse to watch the program to find out if I'm doing it correctly. It won't matter anyway. Despite living on this earth for 40 years and routinely tackling the majority of domestic activities, apparently I pack the dishwasher, do the washing, do the shopping, etc. Wrong. Yours in misery, Luce Brown. Well, we did try and warn the world of the perils of Marie Kondo, and I'm sorry that it has in fact come to pass.
The secret to the folding is threes. So you fold it in thirds and then thirds again.
Yeah,
just a tip.
He's a man, he'll do it wrong.
And then they have to stand up on their own.
They have to stand up on their own, yes.
I think that t-shirt drawer would look amazing. I have one that looks exactly the same. And every time I open it, I get a sense of just joy and relaxation washes over me that something in my life is perfect.
I mean, I just flushed the toilet for the first time in a week. And boy, that felt good.
Small wins in this household. Yeah. Small wins.
And on that note, we will be off, and we wish you all a happy week, and we'll hopefully be in your ears soon.